Good morning. My name is Phil Asgian, a member of Westminster's social justice team, and we build our forums around a common theme. This program year, our theme is building solidarity together, walking along all walking along all God's alongside all God's people, striving for a just world, acting to transform social systems and relationships. This morning, we're pleased to welcome Susan Sheridan Tucker, Executive Director of the Minnesota Alliance on Problem Gambling, speaking on gambling addiction. Susan's work is building a stronger infrastructure on problem gambling services in Minnesota and expanding awareness of the addiction. She serves on the National Council of Problem Gambling Board of Directors, and in July of last year was reelected its president. Gambling is a huge revenue generator for state governments, often with little attention to addiction. We'll learn more about addiction this morning, who's impacted, and how we as a faith community can increase awareness. We do ask that you hold your questions and comments till after Susan's had a chance to present her material. For those of you that are in the Meisel room, I'll bring a mic around for Q&A when we get to that point, and we will be monitoring the live stream chat for those on the live stream as well to put your comments or questions in the chat there. As part of our effort to promote ongoing, respectful conversations in our community, we've established guidelines for the social justice forums that you now see on your screen. I'd just like to highlight one of those guidelines this morning, and that's asking concise questions just because our time is limited and we're trying to encourage as many people to participate as possible. So before we get started, just a short prayer, and then we'll have Susan speak. Holy One, God of justice, breathe into us today a spirit of curiosity and humility. Help us engage with mindfulness, following the lead of voices in our community. Guide our speech and self-awareness to honor the divine in all. Amen. And so here's Susan.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you. It's certainly deliberate for me to be here this particular morning. When Phil approached me to make a presentation and we looked at the calendar, I said, okay, can you hear me now? Okay. So it was very deliberate that I picked this Sunday to come and share with you some information about problem gambling, since this is Super Bowl Sunday, and it is the largest day in which it's the day in which most bets are placed in this country. So I want to tell you just a little bit about my organization. We are the state affiliate to the National Council on Problem Gambling, and we're an advocacy agency. We help people who have different touch points with gambling addiction. So we work with people in recovery. We work with treatment providers. We work with educators, legislators, clinicians, and the gaming industry as well. We take a neutral position on the legalization of gambling, and we believe that enables us to have influence over educating the gambling industry. So as I said, we advocate, we raise awareness, we educate and train, we provide numerous CEUs for treatment providers, and we are the largest resource in the state for problem gambling and gambling disorder. So what is problem gambling? It's the uncontrollable urge to gamble despite the harmful consequences or even the desire to stop. And you may be surprised by this, but it was only until 2013 that the DSM-5 actually acknowledged gambling disorder as a real addiction. And we've been fighting since then to get the state and the federal government to acknowledge it as a real addiction as well. It actually does the same, has the same effects on the brain that substance use disorder and some mental health conditions have on the brain. So overall in the United States, gambling disorder impacts between 3 to 4% of individuals. And there's what we call a continuum of gambling disorder. There are people who, the DSM has 9 criteria in order to be diagnosed with a gambling disorder. If you meet 4 to 9 of those criteria, that's truly a gambling disorder. 1 to 4 would put you on the problematic scale, but certainly should be paid attention to. And so in Minnesota, it means we have 250,000 Minnesotans right now who are impacted in one way on problem gambling. And what we really don't talk about are the families, the community that are also impacted. So 8 to 10, for every one gambler, 8 to 10 individuals are impacted by problem gambling. And this has been just the silent addiction for too long. And that's why I'm here to try and grow awareness in our community. So who's at risk for gambling disorder? Well, people with mental health issues, are culturally diverse communities, veterans, the elderly, pretty much anybody that you can think of, women, men, children. It's a disease that discriminates against no one. And if you particularly have a genetic history in your family for addiction, we would advise that you be mindful of gambling as well, because often we'll see joint or co-occurring kinds of addictions or mental health issues. So what are the warning signs of problem gambling? So it means the loss of control. When you are gambling at a rate that you wouldn't typically do, you're becoming preoccupied with your thoughts and you're not able to stop. Often a lot of people use gambling as an opportunity to escape from other stresses in their life. We often hear from people in recovery that they were exposed to gambling at a very early age with their families, playing poker with their grandparents or, penny poker. And it all being very naive and fun. They recall that was a good experience. So when so if an individual is experiencing a lot of stress in their life, they look back and say, okay, where do I feel, where were those instances I feel good? And they return to gambling. Chasing losses. This is a true characteristic and a difference from gambling disorder to substance use disorder. It's when people are trying to win back the money that they've lost. You'll find that people with gambling problems or gambling disorder will be contacting family members and friends to help them bail out when they have spent too much money. And then you'll also notice that people are withdrawing from their relationships. They become way more isolated as the addiction takes firm root. And also, similar to substance use disorder, those with a gambling disorder build a higher tolerance. And so the need for that dopamine hit just increases. And so the need to play in a constant way. And listening to people who have been in recovery for a long time, it's no longer about the money. but it's the action, it's the play, it's the anticipation of the win. That becomes really important. And unfortunately, gamblers are notorious liars and manipulators because of the fact they don't want people to know that they're gambling. They're masters at being able to tell all sorts of lies, hiding their gambling. And so this becomes a real wake-up call to families. Often families won't find out until perhaps they're doing their taxes for the year, when the W-2G comes, which is if you win over $1,200 in a jackpot, the casino has to provide you a W-2G, which gives you your wins. Well, nobody's giving you a form on your losses. So you can just imagine that people are getting a stack of these, and yet they have nothing, to look back on. That money is all gone, and yet they're going to have to pay taxes on it. So this is how people get into financial ruin over their gambling, among other things. I mean, people clear out their bank accounts. They'll tap into their 401k plans. And all of this seems like, why would you do that? But we have to understand that people are truly addicted. Rational thinking is not part of this process. And again, just the preoccupation that as more and more people, as that addiction takes hold, thoughts are, your normal thoughts are kind of pushed out of your head, and you're thinking about, when's the next time I can play? What's the next opportunity? Where am I going to get the money from to be able to allow me to play? So just to give you a little history about gambling, primarily in Minnesota, 1945 was the first time Minnesota legalized gambling, and it was bingo, allowing the churches and charitable organizations to raise some money through that game. Then in the late 80s, we had a flurry of approvals. The lottery was formed, horse racing, and tribal casinos. In 2007, we have the invention and introduction of the smartphone, which essentially is a computer in our hands. And then in 2013, as I said, gambling was finally recognized as a peer addiction in the DSM-5. And also in that year, when the Viking Stadium was being built, they decided that the debt service would be paid off by electronic pull tabs. And no one ever imagined that the debt service would be paid off early. And the amount of discretionary funds that are spent just on pull tabs in this state, in 2022, it was $4 billion money spent just on pull tabs in this state. That doesn't include casinos. It doesn't include what people are spending at the racetracks, on lottery tickets. So a lot of money going out the door. And then to top it off, in 2018, the Supreme Court overturns the sports ban, which had been in place since the 1920s with the White Sox scandal that many of you may be familiar with. But that opened the gates to allow every state to decide whether they were going to legalize sports betting. Now in Minnesota, we have not yet passed a bill, but there are 3 bills floating around at this point. We'll talk to you a little bit about that later. So then in 2020 and 21, we have COVID, which really, we all were feeling that sense of isolation, and some of the casinos were closed, so it drove people to their phones. And so we've seen an increase in use of gambling on one's phone. And as we stand today, actually it's actually 39 states now. One state just became active, and the District of Columbia have legalized sports betting. So there are many options to gamble in this state. You've got casinos, you've got esports, you have fantasy sports. There's a thing called daily fantasy sports. There's cryptocurrency. There are online casino games. And so there's just a plethora of opportunities for you to lose your money. So we have basically the perfect storm at this point. We've got the lifting of the sports betting ban. We're seeing easy access through technological improvements. We really can't keep up with the pace in which technology is changing. We have the implications of isolation created by COVID. And then we have the convergence of gambling and gaming, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We're moving towards cashless transactions. So easier time to be able to withdraw money from your bank accounts, credit cards. It gets people into a lot of trouble. And then what a lot of people don't realize is the movement towards technology is the vast amount of data that the operators are collecting on the players. Now, this has a dark side and a light side to it. The dark side is that they can manipulate almost in real time on individual players. If they know what game you're playing, they can toss out free bonuses, free money, and they know who their problematic players are. On the flip side, what we're advocating for in the sports betting bill is that neutral third parties get access to that data, amalgamated data. We're not interested in individuals, but we want to understand what people are doing. And this can enforce some pressure on the gambling industry, because if they are keeping that data all unto themselves, we're never going to know what the real impact is. So it's really important that we demand, as if the state is going to sanction an activity like this, the state needs to get access to this data so that we better understand what the implications are and how we can provide better services to those that do get addicted. So again, it's about easy access. The marketing enticements are unreal. I'm sure in this afternoon's game, we're going to see a number of betting ads. And you might see one ad, which I'll show you later, a PSA that was created by the National Council on Problem Gambling. It's the imbalance between betting and what we call responsible gambling is so out of whack. And that's also something that needs to change. But we want families to be aware of this so that you're not normalizing this behavior. Even if it seems very innocent, we want people to understand that it can have implications down the line. And, people talk about the fear of missing out, that if they're not placing that bet, if they're not in the action, they're gonna miss. And of course, we have social media influencers. I know for many of you, this will just seem like a bizarre thing, but if you go online, you can go on an app called Twitch, and millions of people go on these apps and they actually watch people gambling. And what they don't realize, it's a setup, because the influencer is being paid by a particular operator to play, to gamble. Well, he is not putting up any of his own money. And so when you watch this stuff, you'll see this influencer win and they just go berserk. And this becomes very attractive to very impressionable people because they think, oh, he's winning. I could do the same thing. And it catches a lot of young people particularly. So I talked earlier about the confluence of gambling and gaming, and we have real concerns about what's happening with our youth. We know that young people have access to smartphones, and many of them are playing various kinds of games. You know, some of them are purely innocent, but some actually have gambling elements built into them. And I'll show you a video shortly. But youth are 4 times more susceptible to developing a gambling problem than an adult. So we really have to be careful about how we introduce gambling to young people. And again, it's about access. If you have family history of any kind of addiction, we really want you to be aware of that, as well as any history of mental illness, anxiety, depression. It's a way in which a lot of kids choose to escape. So we'll often talk to some youth, and they'll be being bullied at school, and going into their games is a way in which they can just forget about what's happening. And again, it's all about normalization. And I feel like a lot of these games are actually grooming young people for future gamblers. So just some other points on youth factors. If they've experienced any kind of abuse or trauma, depression, anxiety, ADHD, or any learning difficulties, and then if they're using any substances, all of these are risk factors to developing a gambling problem. So in Minnesota, every 3 years, there's the Minnesota Youth Survey, and we've been following it since the early 90s. And we're seeing a slow uptick in gambling problems with youth. The last survey done in 2022, 6,000 high school students indicated they had problems with gambling. And this just burns me because we have no prevention materials in the school. I have to fight tooth and nail to get 3 questions on this survey to ask about gambling, and yet none of the prevention materials even mention problem gambling. They'll talk about drugs and vaping and tobacco and I can't even think of all the substances, but gambling right now isn't one of them. So I'm going to show you this video.
I'd always just think about gambling. I forgot what it was like to hang out with friends and do stuff. And I just became like nothing.
16-year-old Elijah Ballard says he never thought a video game would turn him into a compulsive gambler. He was an outgoing kid who enjoyed Little League baseball and summer camp. When he was 12, he started playing the war game Counter-Strike Global Offensive in the bedroom of his suburban St. Louis home.
I was just stuck in that world. I kept telling myself I want to stop doing this, but I never could.
Counter-Strike Global Offensive, or CSGO, is one of the most widely played esports games in the world. Tens of millions of gamers watch tournaments that sell out pro sports arenas.
The fan base is insane. I mean, the viewership, it's more than the NBA, it's more than the NHL, it's more than the MLB.
Ryan Morrison is a New York attorney who specializes in esports.
Why is my 13-year-old watching Counter-Strike so long? Why is he so invested in this old game that was around when I was a kid? Oh, it turns out it's because he's gambling illegally on it.
CSGO is a major part of an estimated $5 billion esports gambling economy, easily accessed by kids like Elijah. That economy is fueled by status symbols called skins. CSGO players use skins to decorate their guns and knives so they stand out.
It doesn't change anything in the game, it just makes the gun look cooler.
Valve, the company that makes CSGO, also makes the skins, and it makes some harder to find than others.
You can buy and sell these skins, or you can win these skins. These skins now all of a sudden had monetary values assigned to them. It's silly, but it's something people are obsessed with. Why would anybody care what their gun looks like? Why would you collect a skin? It's a lot like collecting baseball cards or something like that.
Elijah used his father's credit card to start buying skins and stored them in his Valve account. Then he saw what a friend had.
My friend had like $100 in his inventory, and I was like, dang, where'd you get all that, like all those good skins? And he said he bet them on this website. And then I was like, oh, I need to try that out.
Elijah discovered that by linking his Valve account to gambling sites, he could use his skins to bet on everything from Counter-Strike tournaments to simple, fast-paced games like roulette or even coin flips.
At your height, how much were you up?
I was never up.
You were a bad gambler.
Yeah.
At your height, how much were you down?
Well, like $10,000.
Please, Trevor, win this shit. Oh, you won it.
Oh my God!
While Elijah was losing money, celebrity gamers like Trevor Martin were glamorizing a higher stakes world. Martin posted a video of himself betting on a site called CSGO Lotto and titled it, How to Win $13,000 in 5 minutes.
If you're a 13-year-old watching at home, what do?
You go to that website, you click a few buttons, and you try to make that money, but you don't. Instead, you go there and you lose your money.
Come on, come on, come on!
Yes! There you go, baby! There you go, baby!
Another popular gamer, Tom Cassell, posted a video of himself winning a $1,000 knife skin, also on CSGO Lotto.
The color of the tip on one side is red, and then the other side is yellow.
These viewers, these underage kids are already sold. They already adore you.
In Toronto, a gamer who goes by the name Honor the Call was curious about Martin and Cassell's relationship with CSGO Lotto, the site they were betting on. He asked Outside the Lines not to reveal his face or real name.
I opened google.com. I typed in Trevor Martin. I typed in CSGO Lotto. So in the next few minutes, I'm looking at legal documents which show that Trevor Martin actually owns the site. I found some info and I want to show it to my viewers.
Last June, Honor the Call posted a series of blistering videos exposing Martin and Cassell as owners of CSGO Lotto.
He f***ing owns the damn site. And look, what the f***, Tom Castle is the vice president. Trevor and Tom, in all seriousness, please stop. What you are promoting here is illegal gambling to your underage fans. When you are playing against a site owner, you can arrive to the conclusion that this whole betting is rigged.
I have no idea how I'm gonna record this video, dude.
After Honor the Call's videos went viral,
All right, guys, so
Martin posted a response.
now my connection to CSGO Lotto has been a matter of public record since the company was first organized in December of 2015. However, I do feel like I owe you guys an apology. I am sorry to each and every one of you who felt like that was not made clear enough to you. And
Martin has denied that CSGO Lotto's odds were rigged in his favor. Martin and Cassell declined to talk to Outside the Lines. The Federal Trade Commission has requested information about CSGO Lotto.
They make millions of dollars before this gambling stuff, and it's disgusting what they did to abuse their child fan base.
Dude, I have a $1,000 knife.
It's straight up fraud in a lot of jurisdictions.
As for Elijah, he says he didn't know where to turn when he hit rock bottom.
I kept losing, I just kept spending more. I talked to a suicide prevention hotline. I was 16 years old. I lost all this money and I wanted to just end my life.
Today, Elijah is in counseling and admits he's addicted to gambling. The high school sophomore rediscovered sports and has good friends again.
Elijah, what are we looking at here?
We're looking at how much I spent.
He says at one point, he had more than $8,300 worth of skins in his Valve account, most of them purchased with his parents' money.
And how much of that is left?
4 cents.
Does it make you feel like a different person now?
Yeah. Like, I don't even know who that is. It's not me. At least that's not who I want it to be. You're the best.
But you can see that this is just one example of a young person. You know, we know enough about brain development that 16-year-old boys don't have executive function fully. And so, you know, unless there are parental oversights, this is how kids fall into this trap. So we need to all be talking to kids about the games that they play. It's not that they shouldn't play games, but you know, why are they attracted to the game? Why are they spending so much time? Are they starting to forego relationships? These are all signs of problem gaming, which is a separate disorder from problem gambling. But the fact that they're embedding these gambling elements into the games, we want parents to be aware that this is what's happening and what we need to be aware of. So, as I said, right now there are no official prevention materials in the school, but we've developed a toolkit, and we are literally knocking on schools' doors to say, will you give us some time? Will you take these materials? And so we're having some success. I have a community educator who goes around the state and makes presentations and talks to parents and coaches, as well as students, so that they are aware of the risks that are involved in these games. So, of course, today is the big game, Super Bowl. So just look at that figure. $1.39 billion, one day, one game. That's a lot of money. And 68% of American adults wager on the Super Bowl. And again, we are not anti-gambling, but what we're concerned about are the parlay bets, which I'm not sure if you know what a parlay bet is, but it's when somebody is betting on two or more activities that need to happen in order to collect the full bet. So, and this is where people get really caught up. If the game gets dull, it's like, oh, let's make it more exciting. Let me bet on 4 or 5 different things to see if that's going to happen. And this is something that we know is a tactic that is extremely attractive to people with gambling addiction. So we want to see parlay bets banned altogether. I don't think that's going to happen in the current sports betting bill. But, you know, as taxpayers, we need to put pressure on our legislators. To me, this is an important consumer protection. If we know that susceptible, vulnerable people are making these parlay bets, we need to be able to stop that. So I was kind of surprised. I told Phil this morning, this came into my mailbox last week. I was like, wow, this is the first time because sports betting isn't legal yet in Minnesota. But this is advertising fantasy sports, which is a gray area in Minnesota. It is not yet regulated. In one of the bills being introduced by Senator Klein, they are addressing fantasy sports to be regulated, but the 2 other bills don't mention it. But you will see, probably if you're watching the game or if you've been watching games all along, you probably have seen some of these ads, especially if they're nationally advised, televised events. So again, it's not legal in Minnesota. And the one benefit to the sports betting bill is they were wise enough to set the age to 21. Currently, you can go into a casino or buy a lottery ticket or play pull tabs at the age of 18. So just some examples of some of the betting ads. And so when people in Minnesota are betting on sports, if they're using their phone, they're actually being directed to offshore sites, which are illegal and extremely predatory. You can place, any kind of bet on an offshore site, but whether you'll get your payout when you want it, well, maybe not. Often what they'll do is they'll continue giving you bonus plays to keep you playing because they know over the long run you're going to lose all your money. And when that happens, the player has no recourse because it isn't regulated. So what are the public health implications? Right now, Minnesota does not acknowledge gambling disorder as a public health, nor does the federal government for that matter. So we want people to understand what the impacts of gambling harms are. It affects relationships. It creates health problems. A lot of people, when they're very much in that zone of gambling addiction, don't take care of themselves, their personal hygiene. They'll forego doctor's appointments, a whole slew of things. They're not sleeping. In fact, many players will use meth to continue gambling because it'll keep them up for hours on end. There's a lot of emotional and psychological distress. Of course, the financial implications are the most obvious, but it impacts the community when people don't show up for work or for school, and the longer somebody is addicted to gambling, the greater likelihood they will commit a crime because they will have used all their resources. They will not have access to money, and so it pushes them to perhaps embezzlement or, I've listened to lots and lots of people in recovery who were attorneys, who were financial advisors and had access to customer accounts and were able to pull that money out. And then also, what we also don't talk about is the implications that gambling has on diverse communities. We did a study back in 2019, I believe, and looked at the Laotian community here. They have a long history of gambling addiction, and their numbers are far higher than what we would normally characterize. I said earlier, it's 3 to 4% of the population. Well, in their community, it's about 20%. And the reasons for that are that as immigrant populations, they see the abundance in the United States, and there's this real need to keep up with that, that as a sign of success, they need to have these things, these objects. And so when you're, for the most part, limited to minimum wage jobs, the allure that gambling has created a sense that gambling will get me ahead, that gambling is a good way to make money. Gambling is never a good way to make money for anybody. Even if you have a win, if you continue to play, chances are you're going to lose that money down the line. So, but within certain cultural communities, like the Laotians and the Hmong, the Chinese, there are gambling elements built into their festivities, and so it's very much part of a wedding or some kind of celebratory event. And so we're working with those groups to understand how best can we make people aware that when you have somebody in your community who is really impacted by gambling addiction, that they're not ostracized by the community, that they can't participate in things because of the gambling that does go on. So how can they begin to make some changes so that people are not excluded? So gambling is also a common co-occurring addiction. So 67% of gamblers have some sort of either anxiety, depression, PTSD. It's extremely high. And one of the things that frustrates me is that we don't screen for gambling. Even in mental health centers, they're not screening for gambling. I can sort of, let the normal healthcare provider off the hook a little bit, but if you're in a substance use disorder treatment and you're not asking your client if they've gambled, we're missing a whole area in which you need to be treating the person comprehensively. And so March 9th, I believe, this year is National Problem Gambling Screening Day. And so we push out a lot of messaging to get professional healthcare workers and mental health providers to at least try to screen. We ask that 3 questions be asked. That's it, just 3. And if somebody answers yes to one of those 3, then we would suggest that individual receive a professional assessment. And assessments and treatment in Minnesota are free. So somebody can go to inpatient care as well as outpatient care for no money. That is the one silver lining in the gambling money that comes into the state, that free treatment is provided. But with the 250,000 people, guess how many people seek treatment in a year? It's about 700, which is really not sufficient. And we only allow 12 hours of counseling for families, which is not enough. And so we're asking that additional hours be set aside for families so that they can go through treatment as well. The other thing that a lot of people don't know is that gambling disorder has the highest rate of suicide. Gamblers are very impulsive, and if they get a thought in their head that, I'm done, I can't do this anymore, I'm ashamed of of what I've done to my family, that's when they're successful in suicide. And again, the Minnesota State Suicide Prevention Plan doesn't mention gambling as a possible motivator for gambling or for suicide. And a recent study this was done in Germany, because we have very little research in the United States on gambling because there's no money invested in research. But 36% of the population who had a long history of suicide ideation, 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes for them to act on it. That, we've got to do better than that. And again, 50% of people who met the criteria for gambling disorder received treatment for another mental health condition, but they didn't receive anything for their gambling disorder. So we know that gambling addiction can be difficult to diagnose because if you're not screening, there's no blood test. It's not obvious. So we have a very low awareness amongst our healthcare and the general public. Senator Klein is a physician, and I asked him how much he knew about addiction, And he said, yeah, in med school, they didn't spend a whole lot of time on this and certainly didn't talk about gambling. So we have a lot of education that needs to happen. So we have inadequate training and screening. I see this as a workforce development issue. We need people throughout the behavioral health system to be educated on problem gambling. There's one course at Metro State University. It's an elective on problem gambling, and that's it. If social work programs or LADC programs, licensed alcohol drug counselor programs, if they're lucky, they may get an hour, which is wholly insufficient. So there needs to be more about that. And again, this is a highly stigmatized and shameful addiction. And we just need to be talking more about it so that we can reduce that level of shame. And again, lack of research. There just isn't any money put towards this. So as members of the faith community, we need to be making space for having these conversations amongst our youth, because the younger we introduce prevention, the greater likelihood we will have to minimize the numbers of people who become addicted to gambling. It'll never go away. We will always have addiction. But if we can really minimize the numbers, that's the work that I'm dedicated to. We want to use positive messaging. We never want to shame somebody for what they're doing. And we have a few tools on our website that people can use to gauge their gambling. There's a normative feedback tool that asks a series of questions and gives you responses immediately in terms of your behaviors and how the kinds of gambling that you're doing. The responses will tell you, well, based on your experience, this percentage of Minnesotans are engaged in this activity. And at the end, they receive a score on the problem gambling, the PGSI score, and it's similar to the DSM-5 where there are 9 criteria. It also has 9 criteria, and then it enables that person to at least have some self-awareness where they fall on that spectrum. It's not going to solve anything, but it gives them greater awareness. And our website has just plenty of resources that we try to get people to engage with. So there are some different strategies that we advocate to try to minimize gambling harm. Voluntary self-exclusion, when an individual can say, I purposely do not want to be allowed in a casino, and they can fill out a contract. We'd like to see enforced breaks in play on electronic gaming, where messages are coming up saying, hey, Joe, you've been here 4 hours, maybe it's time to take a break. We want people to be able to set limits for time and money. We want to see student athletes protected, because with social media the way that it is right now, we have college players who are being threatened when they dropped a ball, when somebody put a wager on their play and it didn't go well, and they're receiving threats, and they're real. So the NCAA is very concerned. Again, prohibiting parlay bets and limiting advertising. So I do want you to, Senator Marty has been probably the most proactive senator with regard to trying to understand gambling addiction. On January 8th, he held an information hearing, and it was really the first time in decades that the legislature got to hear from people with lived experience. So I'm going to play 2 of the recordings from that. And there's no video because neither of these people wanted to be on screen. Again, this is people who are ashamed of their addiction. So I will just play that for you.
Thank you for having me. I will make this short. A gambling disorder is a condition in which gambling becomes an addiction and interferes with a person's daily life. Hi, I am a 32-year-old female and I am a compulsive gambler. I grew up in a household full of gambling, having access to slot machines in my basement and a card table that I sat at frequently. Oddly enough, my father works for one of the largest slot machine companies and lottery providers in the world and has since 2003. I'm speaking today to inform you about my story and how gambling has destroyed my life. For the past 8 years, I have been powerless over my gambling. I knew I had a problem, but I did not admit I was an addict until September 30th, 2024, when I checked myself into a 30-day intense inpatient treatment program. I face complications because of gambling. I'm struggling with relationship and financial problems, legal, possible imprisonment, and deteriorating mental health. I remember sitting in the jail cell 5 months ago wanting to kill myself. Gambling is a trick. I thought it relieved my depression, killed my emotional pain, and delivered a sense of well-being. But I do not think I had any of the above until I became an addict. I was constantly chasing bets that led to losses, draining my savings, building debt, and turned to theft and fraud to support my addiction. I did not care about my family, friends, or now my 8-year-old daughter. I did not even care about my well-being or future. I was selfish. I've stolen sentimental items from my parents like wedding rings and antique tools. I've stolen from my daughter's piggy bank. I had my elderly grandma take out extra school loans for me. I've stolen over $500,000 from past employers. These are just a few of the reckless actions I took. I did anything and everything to get my hands on cash to gamble. Admitting my addiction to my family and friends has been very traumatic. I will forever live with guilt and shame. Gambling has destroyed me, relationships, and my health. I am lucky to be alive. As of today, I have not gambled in 6 months and will never place a bet again. I know what gambling has done to me, what it can do to others, especially the young generation that are clueless. I'm committed to my journey of recovery, and every step I take is towards a healthier me. I hope to continue to raise awareness and share my story. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kay, for sharing your story, and best wishes in your recovery journey. Thank you. Finally,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Finally, of Joshua.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Yes. Good morning. I will also try to make this brief. My name is Joshua. I'm 42 years old. I have a master's in business administration. I run my own real estate business. I don't drink and I don't do drugs, and I know exactly how gambling and math works. But despite all that, I am a compulsive gambler. My family, we have a combined household income of over $500,000, credit scores above 800. And in the last 15 years, I have gambled away over $1.5 million, nearly 70% of that, which was online, both a combination of sports betting and casino gambling. In that time, in addition to that 1.5 spent, I racked up about $450,000 in debt to fund my gambling. I had 13, because I had such good income and credit scores, I was able to take out 13 different personal loans, and I had 11 credit cards, all of which were maxed out. I was making 24 different monthly payments every single month just to maintain the loans that were contributing to my gambling. I had gone through and done an assessment of where I was spending, and I would find, going through my records, I was depositing 15 to 20 times per day. I found that depositing online was way easier than trying to go into a casino. I could just keep going because nobody knew what I was doing. I drained my family's bank accounts, my own retirement accounts, my kids' college funds. The online betting was so abstracted that I lost all concept of what money was. It impacted my health, constant stress from anxiety from lying, and not only the lying, but preparing for lying. Because my family didn't know anything about this, I was constantly creating stories and inventing stories for what I would tell them when they did start to ask questions. I gained weight. I didn't eat properly. I didn't sleep because I was betting online all throughout the night. It didn't matter. I could bet on a tennis game in Russia. Because it was online and on my phone, I could do it whenever I wanted. And I couldn't not watch the games. I would sometimes hide in the bathroom to watch the games, to make sure to see how things were going. I was not parenting my children. I wasn't being a partner to my wife and a husband. The trauma that my family experienced when I finally confessed to them my addiction, it's been almost a year and a half now since I let them know, and they're still recovering. And the constant barrage of advertising that we see now for legalized sports betting, when you're watching football games or basketball games, it's triggering. And as I was gambling, the more I would gamble, the bets I would make got riskier and riskier and riskier, and I would have some just crazy parlays. And one of the things that has been so difficult about this, and I think it was mentioned earlier, is that the number of people with gambling addiction therapy experience is extremely limited. There's a lot of alcohol and drugs, but trying to find a therapist that can attend to gambling addiction with that specialty is so difficult. And I almost gave up many times because I couldn't find the right people to support me. So this disease has created significant trauma, and I do feel that having it accessible online has made what was already a dangerous disease significantly worse. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Oops. There we go. So, as you can see and hear, the impact is pretty substantial. We're running out of time, so I could go on and on. There's so much I can tell you. Nope, I'm going to do that right now because we're okay. So, call to action. As part of our Hope for the World and being a Matthew 25 congregation, it's imperative, really, that as Phil opened us this morning, that there are lots of vulnerable people that we need to walk alongside, and this is an area where, as individuals, you can become more educated. You can, talk amongst your family and friends about this. We've got lots of resources available, and you can really advocate with your legislators. Again, there are bills that are floating around the legislature, and I can talk to you more about that. But it's really important that we as a community make our voices known about this issue, that it is important, that even though it's only 250,000 Minnesotans, we need to be paying attention to it, and we need to be able to provide care for those individuals who are suffering. If the state is going to sanction such an activity, then the state also needs to support the services that have negative impacts on people. So I think I'll
Okay,
stop there.
so sorry we ran a little bit longer here, but very good information, and thank you, Susan, so much for sharing your insights and perspectives. Next week, we will welcome members of Westminster's Cuba Partnership Team, and they're going to talk about the current living situation in Cuba, the water purification project that's coming up. You may have seen the display out in Westminster Hall, and they're going to be looking for volunteers for that as an opportunity. And they're also going to talk about the work of our partner team in Cuba. So thank you all very much for your attention, and thank you again, Susan.